The snowstorm had swallowed the mountain by the time I came back from the valley. The wind was loud, sharp, cutting through the trees like a warning. My boots sank deep into the snow as I climbed the slope toward my cabin. I was tired, cold, and just wanted warmth. But something felt wrong. I stopped a few feet from the door and saw a light shining from under it. That light wasn't supposed to be there. I always turned everything off before I left. My cabin sat alone in the middle of nowhere, no neighbors, no roads, just miles of forest. I pulled my old hunting rifle from the woodpile and stepped onto the porch slowly, careful not to make noise. My heart pounded. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the fire was burning low. The cabin was warm, and someone was there. At first, I couldn't see clearly, just a shape near the back wall, still, like a shadow that didn't belong. Then I saw her. Looked like a woman, but not quite. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on water, silver blue with glowing lines under the surface. Her eyes were large, glowing softly, and filled with fear. She was wearing one of my old jackets, too big for her hand. She had something strange attached. To her waist, a crystal that pulsed with faint light. She didn't speak at first, only stared at me. I raised my rifle, not to shoot, but to show I wasn't helpless. She finally stepped back a little and said in a soft, broken voice, "You shouldn't be here." I almost laughed. "This is my cabin," I said. "Who are you?" She looked like she wanted to run, but her legs shook. I noticed the blood on the floor, thick, dark, and clearly not human. She was hurt. She held her side with one hand, breathing hard. She looked scared, like a cornered animal, but not dangerous. "I needed shelter," she whispered. "Please, don't tell them." I kept the rifle pointed at the floor and looked her over. She was freezing, bleeding, and scared. Whatever she wasn't strong enough to fight. "Looking for you," I asked. She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, we heard something in the sky. Not thunder. A deep, low hum, mechanical, unnatural. Her eyes went wide with panic. She rushed to the window and peeked through the edge of the curtain. "They found me," she whispered. "If they find me, Earth burns." Her voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it, but the fear in her words was clear. I moved to the other window and looked out. The wind howled, the snow blew sideways, but in the distance, I saw faint lights moving lights. It's too smooth to be aircraft, too silent to be helicopters. Something was out there, something not from here. Looked back at the strange woman in my jacket, crouched by the fire, bleeding and trembling. She wasn't just hiding. She was running from something worse than death. I didn't lower my gun, but I didn't force her out either. I didn't understand what she was, or what was coming, but I knew this whatever was out there, it scared her. And if it scared something not human, then maybe it should scare me too. The fire crackled softly between us as we stared at each other in silence. Snow kept falling outside, but inside the cabin, something had already begun. Something strange. Something dangerous. And I had just stepped into it without even knowing. She didn't speak much the first few hours. I watched her from across the room as she sat near the fire, wrapped in the old wool blanket I'd given her face pale and tired. Her hand stayed close to the strange crystal at her side, like it was something more than just a tool, maybe a part of her. The snowstorm raged outside, hammering against the cabin walls, but the silence between us was heavier than the wind. I didn't ask more questions, not yet. I cooked soup, something warm and simple, and placed a bowl near her. She stared at it like she didn't understand, then picked it up slowly and took a careful sip. Her body trembled slightly as the warmth touched her. After a while, she looked at me with tired eyes and finally spoke. "My name is Thera," she said. Her voice was soft, like it was hard for her to speak in my language. She looked human mostly, but her skin still had that silver glow, and her eyes seemed to shine from inside. She told me she was not from Earth. Her ship had been damaged, in orbit, and she had barely escaped before it exploded. She landed somewhere in the mountains and walked for 2 days through the snow, bleeding and hunted until she found my cabin. I asked who was chasing her. She hesitated, then said they were soldiers from her own world or something worse. They weren't just hunting her. They wanted to make sure she never reached anyone. Not just because she escaped, but because of what she carried. She didn't explain clearly, just said, "If they find me, they will destroy this planet to erase me." That sounded insane to me, but I could see how serious she was. Her hands were shaking. Her wound looked bad, still leaking dark, strange blood. She had tried to clean it herself, but needed real help. I grabbed my supplies, sat next to her, and began to bandage her side. She flinched at first, but then let me. Her skin was warm, softer than I expected. She didn't look at me while I worked, but her breathing slowed. When I finished, she said, "Thank you," and I could hear real emotion in her voice. I asked her again what she had done to make her own people hunt her across space. She only said, "I saw something they tried to hide. They fear what I know." Her eyes stared into the fire like she was far away. I didn't understand it all, but I knew she was afraid, and not just for herself. She kept listening to the wind like she expected to hear something ship's footsteps, voices that didn't belong to Earth. I asked her if she trusted me. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "You didn't turn me in," she said. "That means something." I told her Earth might be cold, but not everyone here is cruel. She smiled faintly. "You're different than I thought humans would be." That surprised me. I asked her what she thought we were like. She said nothing, just looked at the fire again. Maybe she didn't want to insult me. Or maybe she was trying to figure it out herself. I stayed up most of the night, watching the windows, listening to the wind. I didn't know what was coming, but something in my gut told me this wasn't over. Thera slept at last, curled near the fire like someone who hadn't rested in weeks. She looked small, vulnerable, not like a creature from the stars, but like a lost soul hiding from monsters. I sat in the chair by the window, rifled across my lap, heart full of questions, eyes heavy with sleep. Outside, the snow kept falling. The mountain was quiet, but it felt like we were standing at the edge of something big, something that had already started and would not stop, even if we begged it to. The morning sky was gray when I stepped outside. Snow covered everything like a thick blanket, and the air was bitter cold. I wanted to believe the worst had passed, that maybe the strange lights we'd seen last night were only part of a dream. But something deep inside me said it wasn't over. I chopped some wood and brought it back inside, trying to act normal, but Thera was already awake. Standing near the window, her eyes sharp and tense, she said she heard something before dawn, something above the trees. I listened to and after. A few minutes, I heard it a soft hum, low and steady, like a machine gliding through the sky. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't anything from Earth. I grabbed my old binoculars and climbed the short ridge behind the cabin. From there, I could see far across the snow-covered trees. And I saw it. A ship, long and dark, moving slowly above. The forest, almost invisible against the clouds. It didn't make a sound. It moved like it was searching. I crawled back down to Thera and told her what I'd seen. Her face turned pale. She said it was a scout, one of the silent killers from her people. If it had found her signal, it would not leave without destroying everything nearby. I felt a wave of fear hit me. This wasn't some distant war anymore. It was here, on my land. I didn't know what to do, but I remembered the old radio in my cabin. It hadn't been used in years, but I kept it for emergencies. I switched it on, tuned it to the relay tower frequency, and called for help. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to make them listen. Strange lights, unknown aircraft, possible foreign threat. The man on the other end was skeptical at first, but when I gave him coordinates and said I had video footage, he promised to alert higher command. I grabbed my old phone, still charged from the valley trip, and showed him a short clip of the silent ship above the trees. That was enough. Within a few hours, I saw contrails in the sky jets flying in fast from the base down south. Then, something even faster followed, sharp-shaped aircraft I'd never seen before, black and glowing. With blue light, Earth's newest fighters, they didn't wait. As soon as they saw the alien scout, they attacked. The sky exploded with light. Fireballs and trails of smoke filled the air. The alien ship fired strange weapons, beams of red and purple, but Earth's. Ships dodged and fired back with smart missiles and railguns. It wasn't a long battle. The alien ship couldn't keep up. It tried to run, but Earth's fighters surrounded it, drove it down. I saw it crash miles away, behind the hills. A trail of smoke marked where it fell. Thera stood beside me, the whole time quiet and still. I expected relief on her face, maybe hope, but she looked more afraid than ever. I asked her what was wrong. She said the ship that came was just a scout, a small one. Now that Earth had fired back, they would return with more. Many more. I asked her how soon. She didn't know. Could be days. Could be hours. She told me something I'll never forget. They don't care about humans. If you help me, they'll treat your whole world as the enemy. I looked around my land snow, trees, peace, and then I looked at her, tired, hurt, but still standing. I thought about walking away, but I couldn't. She had no one. And if we didn't stand now, we'd fall later. I told her we'd face whatever. Came together. I wasn't a soldier, but I wouldn't let strangers destroy my world without a fight. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes besides fear. It was trust. That night, we didn't speak much, but we both stayed awake watching the sky, waiting because we knew what had started could not be stopped. We would not run. The morning was cold and silent, but something felt heavier than the frost in the air. Thera sat by the fire, holding the strange crystal in her hands. It glowed gently like it was alive. She hadn't said much since the scout ship was shot down. Her face was calm, but I could tell something inside her was breaking. I sat across from her, still holding the old rifle. I didn't know what would come next, but I wanted answers. I asked her again, why were they really after her? What secret was so big they would send warships just to silence her? She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded like she had made a choice. She held up the crystal. This is not just a weapon, she said. It's memory, living memory. She touched it, and for a second, lights shimmered across the cabin walls. Tiny stars, floating images, flashes of cities, ships, and people I didn't recognize. She said this crystal held everything: battle plans, dark truths, records of what her people had done. Her empire wasn't just a powerful civilization. It was built on destruction, whole species wiped out, planets turned to ash, lies told across the stars to hide the truth. She had been part of it once, a soldier, trusted with knowledge most were never allowed to see. But one day she saw too much. She saw the real face of her leaders, the secrets they kept even from their own people. She realized her people weren't. Defending peace, they were spreading fear and controlling others through silence and war. So she took the crystal and ran. She had hoped to escape, to somewhere safe, somewhere far. But no place was far enough. They don't want to kill me, because I betrayed them, she said quietly. They want to kill me because I know the truth. I felt a chill run down my back, not from the cold, but from what she had just said. I asked her why she came to Earth. Why us? Why bring this here? She looked up at me, her eyes bright like stars. Because your world still feels honest. She said, because you helped me even when you didn't have to. Maybe your people will do what mine could not. I didn't know if that was true. Humans weren't perfect. We had our own wars, our own lies. But I understood what she meant. We hadn't reached the stars yet. We hadn't broken ourselves with too much power. Maybe we still had a chance to. Choose better. I stared at the crystal in her hands. It looked so small, so quiet. But inside it was a storm that could change everything. I asked her if she was ready to share it with the world. She hesitated, then said, if I don't, your world will be the next to fall. You don't have time to stay blind. I didn't fully understand the crystal or how it worked. But I knew one thing. Earth needed to see it. We couldn't prepare for war if we didn't even know what was coming. I offered to take her to someone who could help someone in the government. Someone who could use this truth to protect Earth. But Thera warned me again. Once you choose this path, she said, you will be part of it. They won't stop. They'll come for you too. I looked out the window at the mountains I loved, The trees covered in snow, the sky so wide and clear. I thought about staying quiet, about letting someone else deal with it. But deep inside, I knew I couldn't walk away. I told her, then let them come. I'm not letting them wipe out my planet. She looked at me surprised. Then slowly, she smiled. Not with happiness, but with something like peace. That night we made a plan. We would head for the nearest command base once the storm cleared. We would show them the crystal, tell them everything. Earth would have to prepare for what was coming. Thera didn't sleep that night. She sat by the fire, holding the crystal like it was her last hope. I stayed close, my rifle ready, listening to the silence outside. It felt like the mountain was holding its breath, waiting. The war hadn't reached Earth yet, but it would. And when it did, we would not be silent. We would face it together. ChatGPT said, the snow began to melt a little by the third day, and the air carried the scent of smoke. Not from my chimney, but from the horizon. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. I kept the rifle close and helped Thera gather the things we needed: the crystal, a map, food and clothes warm enough for travel. But by the time we stepped outside, it was already too late. The sky above the ridge glowed with orange light. Shadows moved across the clouds. 3 ships, larger than the Scout, much larger. Their shape was sharp and jagged like flying blades. They didn't drift quietly like the first one. These moved with purpose, and I could feel the ground tremble. Under my boots as they passed, Thera dropped to her knees, clutching the crystal tight. It's them, she whispered. Strike force. They're not here to search. They're here to destroy. I pulled her up, and we ran behind the cabin, following the trail through the trees that only I knew. We had to get out of sight fast. I knew these mountains better than anyone. If I could get us down to the old ridge path, we might be able to stay ahead of them. But I didn't know if they had already spotted us. We didn't make it far before we saw the first blast. One of the ships fired at the slope where the cabin sat. The explosion was like thunder. My cabin, my home, was swallowed in flame. Heat swept through the trees like a wave. Thera cried out, not just in fear, but in guilt. They're destroying everything, she said, just to erase me. I grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. We had no choice but to run. A few miles down, near the frozen river, we saw the first human soldiers to scouting teams in light armor, faces tense, weapons drawn. They had arrived from the base I had called. I waved my arms and shouted, pointed their weapons at first, unsure, but when I showed them Thera and the crystal, they lowered their guns and led us to a temporary command post in the trees. It was small, rough, just a few tents, but it had radios, drones, and brave men ready to fight. I explained everything to the officer in charge. He looked at me like I was mad, till Thera showed him the crystal's light. She unlocked a portion of its memory, and suddenly the tent filled with floating images, ships, alien cities, secret war maps, recordings in a strange language. The officer's face went pale. He called for backup. Within minutes, the post was buzzing. More troops arrived, heavier weapons, drones scanning the sky. But the ships were already searching. I could hear their engines grow louder. We didn't have time to move. The officer gave orders to prepare defenses. I offered to help, to guide the soldiers through the trees and slopes I had walked since childhood. I wasn't a soldier, but I knew these paths better than anyone. Thera stayed near the command tent, guiding them with knowledge of how the enemy ships might move, where they might strike, and how to hit their weak spots. She had once served with them, now she was helping Earth fight back. It was strange to see her like this, not a frightened woman by the fire, but a fighter, determined and focused. The first battle began before sunset. One of the alien ships dipped low into the valley, searching. Earth's forces fired missiles from cover. The ship dodged, but not fast enough. One wing exploded. The ship spun, hit the trees, and crashed. In flames, a loud cheer rose from the forest, but it didn't last. The second ship came in from above and opened fire on the ridge. Earth soldiers scrambled for cover. The sky turned red with fire and smoke. I fought beside them, my rifle. Nothing compared to their weapons, but I fired anyway. I saw soldiers fall. I saw others rise and keep fighting. It was chaos. Thera used the crystal again, connecting it to Earth's system. Somehow she found a way to send a signal that jammed the enemy ship's tracking systems. Earth's drones moved in fast and dropped charges right into its engines. The second ship exploded midair, sending pieces raining down. But the third ship, the biggest, one landed behind us. Soldiers poured out, tall, armored beings with glowing weapons. They moved fast and without mercy. I fought with everything I had. Thera shouted commands. Earth soldiers stood their ground. I got hit once just to graze, but it felt like fire. Still, we pushed forward. Thera ran ahead, holding the crystal like a torch. The alien soldiers saw her and tried to stop her, but Earth fighters covered her from both sides. She reached the ship and threw the crystal against the hull. Flash of blue light spread like lightning. The ship froze. Systems shut down. Then it exploded from inside, one final blast lighting the sky. The battle was over. Earth had won. Barely. Smoke filled the valley. Trees were burning. Bodies both human and alien lay scattered across the snow. But we had survived. Thera collapsed near me, weak, shaking, but smiling. She looked up at me and said, "You didn't run." I took her hand and said, "Neither did you." We had lost much, but we were still alive, and Earth had just fired its first shot in a war that was no longer just hers but ours. The battle had left the valley scarred and blackened, with broken trees, scorched earth, and pieces of alien metal scattered across the snow. Smoke still drifted from the remains of the third ship, and the smell of burning fuel hung in the cold air. I stood beside Thera near what was left of the command post. My arms ached, my clothes were torn, and my body was sore from running, fighting, and falling. But I was alive, so was she. Earth had survived its first real fight with something not from this world. The soldiers moved through the wreckage, helping the wounded, gathering what they could, and carrying their fallen back to base. No one celebrated. The air was heavy with pain, with the knowledge that this was just the beginning. Thera sat quietly beside a small fire, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale, her body weak. Using the crystal had drained her. It had connected her mind to the enemy ship, forced her to tap into their systems and overload them from the inside. She told me later that doing it nearly burned her alive from within. I believed her. Her hands were shaking and her voice was barely a whisper, but she was still trying to help. She kept giving the officers information, names, numbers, signals, everything she could remember. Earth's leaders were finally listening. News of the mountain attack had already reached the outside world. Photos, drone footage, and survivor reports had spread like wildfire across the internet. People were scared, but they were also angry. Angry that something had dared to come here to attack unprovoked, to kill without warning. For the first time in history, all the world's governments spoke with one voice. The president gave a speech that night. Every channel showed it. Thera and I watched it from a recovery tent surrounded by soldiers and medics. The screen flickered to life and the president stood tall, serious, and calm. "Today," he said, "we faced an enemy not of this earth, and we stood our ground. We did not ask for war, but we will not run from it. To those who seek to harm our people, know this earth is no longer silent. We are awake, and we will defend what is ours." The words echoed across every home, every base, every station in orbit. Earth had chosen its path. Thera's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know if it was from pain, fear, or something else. Maybe it was hope. For the first time since she crashed here, she wasn't alone. Earth wasn't running. It was standing beside her. In the days that followed, everything moved fast. Earth's best scientists studied the broken ships and the crystal. Thera helped them unlock secrets buried deep in alien code. We learned more in those few days than we had in the last 100 years. New energy systems, weapons, shields, data transfer technology, things that had only existed in fiction were now becoming real. Factories lit up. Engineers worked day and night. Earth was building ships, with real firepower designed, not just to fly, but to fight. A new defense program was formed. Soldiers from all nations trained together, using tactics Thera helped shape. The mountain base became a center of knowledge and planning. I stayed there too. They wanted me to leave, to return home, and let them handle the rest. But I couldn't. I had seen too much. I had stood in the fire and made a choice. I wasn't going back to silence. Thara and I were partners now. We were part of something bigger, something dangerous. Yes, but also something worth fighting for. One night, after a long day of planning and meetings, she sat beside me under the stars. The fire crackled quietly between us. She looked tired, her shoulders heavy with everything she had seen and done. "Do you regret helping me?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. You didn't bring the war here. They did. You gave us a chance to survive it." She nodded slowly. "You're braver than most of my own people. They would have left me." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked at the stars. Somewhere up there, more ships were waiting. More enemies. More danger. But now Earth wasn't blind. Now we had a voice. And that voice had teeth. Thera smiled then, a small, sad smile. "I thought I had lost everything," she said. "But maybe I found something instead." I reached out and took her hand. It was warm, despite the cold. We sat like that for a while, in the quiet, not needing words. The mountain wind blew gently through the trees, and the stars kept shining above us. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were ready. Not for peace. Not yet. But for whatever came next. The warning came before sunrise. Through a short, sharp message over the base, radio unidentified objects had entered Earth's orbit, moving fast, in tight formation. The tone of the officer's voice said everything. This wasn't a false alarm. It was them. Thera was already awake when I reached the main tent, her face calm but her eyes filled with tension. She looked up at the sky like she already knew what was coming. "It's a full fleet," she said softly. They didn't come to search or threaten this time. They came to end it. Within an hour, everyone at the base was moving. Drones took to the sky, defense systems powered up. Earth's new warships, barely finished, were launched from hidden bases and platforms across the planet. They rose, like steel arrows into the morning light, fast and bright with fire from their engines. Thera stood beside me on the command platform, watching the feeds from space. Dozens of alien ships appeared on the screens, arranged in perfect lines, shaped like blades and shields. Their weapons were already glowing. We had expected another small attack. But this was a fleet built to destroy a planet. Earth's ships met them head-on in the upper atmosphere, just above the clouds. Our ships were fewer, newer, and smaller, but they had speed, and more importantly, they had will. The battle above Earth began like a storm. Flashes of light covered the sky as missiles, energy blasts, and debris rained down. One by one, alien ships fell, but they took some of ours with them. Earth pilots fought with everything they had. I watched a young squad leader dive his ship into the belly of a much larger enemy craft, taking them both out. No one had trained for this kind of war, but they fought anyway. Ground forces waited, holding cities and launch sites. Everyone knew that if our ships failed in space, the next fight would be on the ground, and it would be brutal. But Thera wasn't watching the skies anymore. She was focused on one ship in the fleet, the largest at the center. She said it was the flagship, the command vessel. If we could take it out, the others might fall into confusion, she said. She could disable it from here if she could reach the right signal through the crystal, but it would need a strong data connection and perfect focus. The officers didn't want to risk it. They said it was too dangerous, but I stood by her. I told them if Earth had come this far because of her knowledge, then this was the moment we trusted her completely. They agreed. We moved her to the signal room, connected the crystal to Earth's satellite grid, and cleared the area. Thera sat in the middle of the room, hands glowing as the crystal floated before her. Her eyes closed, her breathing slow, her mind reaching into the heart of the enemy's ship. Around us, sirens screamed and orders shouted through radios. The screen showed ships falling from both sides. Earth's defense line was bending, close to breaking. The flagship had started charging a weapon, one that could wipe out entire cities from orbit. We didn't have much time. Thara's body started to tremble as the light from the crystal grew stronger. Her skin glowed, her hands shook, and blood dripped from her nose. I tried to step closer, but the technicians stopped me. They said she was deep inside their system now. One wrong move, and it would all collapse. I stood frozen, watching the person who had once hidden in my cabin, now holding the fate of the planet in her hands.
Oh.
Then everything on the screens flickered. One by one, enemy ships started moving off course. The flagship stopped charging. Its lights dimmed. Then, with a sudden flash of white-blue fire, it exploded. A cheer went through the base, but it was short. Thara fell backward, unconscious, the crystal dim in her lap. I ran to her, calling her name, lifting her into my arms. She was still breathing, but barely. Medics rushed in and carried her to the field hospital. I followed, refusing to leave her side. Outside, the battle changed. The enemy ships, without a leader or command signal, began to scatter. Earth's fighters picked them off one by one. The sky slowly cleared. Victory didn't come with loud cheers or banners. It came with silence. With broken ships falling from the sky like stars, with the tired faces of those who had given everything and still stood, Thara stayed unconscious for hours. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, whispering that we had won, that Earth was safe, that she had done it. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked at me with the softest smile. "You didn't give up on me," she whispered. "Not once." I shook my head and said, "And I never will." She closed her eyes again, and this time she rested not out of fear, but out of peace. Earth had survived the greatest threat it had ever faced. But it wasn't just because of our ships or weapons. It was because of one alien woman who had chosen to run instead of obey, to speak instead of stay silent, and to trust one human when she had every reason not to. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, spreading soft golden light over the damaged earth below, where trees were burned, machines lay broken. The scent of war still hung in the cold morning air. It had been 2 days since the enemy fleet was destroyed, since Thara shut down the alien flagship with the power of her crystal, and nearly lost her life doing it. The fighting had ended, but the world was still waking up to the weight of what had happened. I sat outside the base hospital, watching the smoke clear from the sky. Thara was inside, still healing. They said her body had suffered internal stress, her nervous system pushed too far, her strength drained. But she was alive. That was all I needed to hear. Earth was quiet now, but not the same. The people had changed. Soldiers walked differently. They looked up at the stars with something new. In their eyes, not fear, but understanding. We were not alone anymore. The world now knew that the universe could be both beautiful and dangerous. And we had survived our first test. Leaders from across the globe had arrived at the mountain base. They didn't come in suits or with guards. They came with questions and purpose. Thara, even while weak, met with them in a small chamber lit by soft lights. I stayed by the wall as she told them everything about her people. The crystal, the war, and the truth she had risked everything to bring. They listened. For once, they truly listened. When she finished, there was silence. Then one of the leaders, an older woman with kind eyes, stood and said, "Earth owes you more than we can ever repay." Thara only shook her head. "I didn't come here for payment. I came because I believed you could be different than us. Please prove me right." And they promised her they would. That day, Earth's united fleet was born. A new force not to conquer space, but to protect our world and others like it. Not to strike first, but never again be taken by surprise. Scientists studied the remains of the alien ships, working with Thara to understand how to use their technology without repeating their mistakes. Factories began building newer, better ships. Pilots trained with new courage, knowing what they might face. But the war wasn't just about weapons. It had changed how people saw one another. Borders mattered less. Humanity had stood together. For once, not as countries, but as a species. And it had made all the difference. I returned to the mountains with Thara, Once she was strong enough, she asked to go back to the cabin, even though it had burned. She said she wanted to see the place where it all began. I rebuilt what I could: simple walls, a roof, a fire pit. We made a home again, not fancy, but warm and quiet. She liked it. That way, sometimes we sat on the porch, staring at the stars. She would tell me stories of her childhood on a world with red oceans and floating trees. I would tell her about Earth's seasons, about how snow smelled before a storm, or how trees whispered in the wind. One night she leaned against my shoulder and said, "Do you think your people will stay united now?" I thought about it for a while, then said, "We forget fast, but this we won't forget so easily. You made sure of that." She smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "I didn't save your world," she said. "You saved each other. I only lit the fire." I took her hand and said, "Then stay. Watch what grows from it." She nodded. And from that day forward, she stayed. She became part of Earth's future, not as a leader or a warrior, but as a guide, a voice of memory and warning. The world called her many things: hero, survivor, visitor. To me, she was something else. It was the woman who had hidden in my cabin and trusted me when she had no reason to. She was the woman who gave Earth a fighting chance. And now, she was simply home. We didn't need big words between us anymore. We had seen war, death, fear, and hope together. The silence of the mountain, under stars that no longer felt empty, we finally had peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of understanding. The kind of peace you fight for. It's the kind you hold on to with both hands.